guys and welcome to today's video. So as we all know, Russia has launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine early on Thursday. And this will have sweeping consequences for not just Ukraine or Russia or Europe, but for the international order as well. According to the Ukraine presidency, there has been innumerable casualties till now. In this video, we will try to simplify this complicated matter and together understand the situation. We will be discussing about the motive behind this invasion, actions of Russia thus far, and the consequences of this war for the countries involved as well as for India.
Right, we wake up this morning to a war.
Any attempt to interfere with this Russian action would lead to, quote, consequences they have never seen.
Gunfire and explosions have been heard here and in the second city of Kharkiv.
So first, let us start with the background of the crisis and try to analyze the plausible motivations behind what Russia terms the special military operation in the Ukrainian territory. Going back in time, following the end of Cold War and the disintegration of the Soviet Union in 1991, among the 15 constituent countries that proclaimed themselves as independent, Ukraine happens to be one of them, and Russia remained a great successor to the USSR. Although a large chunk of the population in these countries were content and relieved by the disintegration, some portions of the population were disappointed. They sympathized with Russia and wanted a reunification of the countries because of the long-standing cultural, historical, and ethical ties that had been broken because of the disintegration. Putin, holding similar views, wants Russia to regain the territorial control, citing the same cards of ethnicity and history. Ukraine is geographically sandwiched between Russia and Europe, and about 1/3 of Ukrainians are pro-Russians, especially the people from the East. These people believe that the people of Russia and Ukraine are ethnically and culturally very similar, both being Slavic countries. But the remaining part of Ukraine's population, which is also, by the way, the majority, also wishes to join the European Union. And some of them want to be associated with the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. The NATO, or the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, is a military alliance between 28 European countries and 2 North American countries. It basically works on the principle of collective security. That is, whenever any member state of the NATO is attacked by any external party, the remaining countries will get together and collectively deter the aggressor and militarily defend the threat mutually. Russia is surrounded by countries that are a part of NATO on its borders. In the east, it has Japan, which is a NATO partner, and in the west, it shares boundary with the Baltic countries of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Besides, it also shares a long border with Finland, which is a major supporter and contributor to NATO. With NATO leadership primarily resting on the USA and NATO committing to collective security, Russia is obviously apprehensive of Ukraine expressing such aspirations of associating closely with the West because it will only increase Russia's security threat. This brings us to the second motive. Russia wants to contain the expansion of European Union and maintain a balance of power in this region. It is a possibility that Moscow wishes to cripple the Ukrainian military abilities by sowing turmoil in the Ukrainian government and also ultimately turning Ukraine into a failed state, because it would bring an end to the threat of Ukraine as an intractable adversary and also to the innumerable security threats that Ukraine might pose in the future. Some political scientists are also of the belief that there are certain ancillary objectives to create discord within Europe, particularly between Europe and the United States, and bring Ukraine under Russia's control for easy access to its resources and the port of Sevastopol in the Black Sea region for strategic purposes. Russia would also prioritize the destruction of Ukrainian arms manufacturers by eliminating Ukraine's capacity to develop and produce Neptune cruise missiles, Sapson missile systems, and Rim 2 short-range ballistic missiles. Russia could remove the prospective threat of conventional deterrence from Ukraine in the immediate future. Now, coming to the actions taken by Russia so far. At first, let's take a look at the map of Ukraine. In March 2014, on the pretext of defending its own interests and that of the Russian-speaking population, Russia annexed Crimea in southern Ukraine. Soon after, pro-Russian separatists in the areas of Luhansk and Donetsk declared their independence from the capital city of Kiev, which led to armed conflicts. These two provinces of Donetsk and Luhansk, together termed as Donbas region of eastern Ukraine, had large areas under the control of separatist groups. These groups wanted to break away from Ukraine and form their own nations. Russia helped these separatist groups by providing them financial and military support. Russia also provided passports to over 8 lakh people in this region. They helped create proxy wars in these areas in order to maintain the tension, which has resulted in more than 14,000 casualties so far. A peace treaty called the Minsk Treaty was signed in 2015 to maintain peace in these two provinces. Under this treaty, all the foreign forces involved had to be removed from the Donbas region, but Ukraine had to give a certain autonomy to these regions. It means they acted almost like separate nations, even though they were officially a part of Ukraine. On 10th November, reports suggested that Putin had started deploying troops to borders of Donbas, and by 28th November, over 1 lakh Russian troops with the help of the Belarusian government had surrounded Ukraine. A couple months of tension followed in the region, and on 21st February of this year, Putin infamously declared that Russia is ready to accept the People's Republic of Luhansk and the People's Republic of Donetsk as separate countries from Ukraine.
I think it is necessary to make a long overdue decision to immediately recognize the independence and sovereignty of the Donetsk People's Republic and the Luhansk People's Republic.
And on 24th of February, Russian troops infiltrated these regions, thus breaking the Minsk Treaty. Initially being cited as peacekeeping mechanisms by the Russian government, these invasions have already resulted in the death of many in the Ukrainian region. Russian troops have already captured regions of Kharkiv and Chernobyl, and looking at the turn of events, it seems like Putin is eyeing for the capital city of Kiev. Countries like the USA, Canada, France have issued a strong warning to Russia and asked for its troops to call back. While China has shown support to Putin, some of the countries like the United States of America have issued sanctions to cut off trade with Russia to damage their economics with other countries of NATO threatening to follow. Although the Russian government seemed to have no intention to stop the invasion. So what does this mean for the rest of the world? Is Third World War inevitable? And what are the consequences that might affect India? Well, it is clear as day that there has been the formation of two separate blocs. Ukraine being supported by the NATO countries, while Russia being backed up by China, and yet, thankfully, and here's hoping hard, that a world war does not seem inevitable as of now. Since all the nations involved are holders of nuclear weapons, we can at least hope that they act a little sensibly. Now, coming to the impact the war might have on the world as well as India. Both Russia and Ukraine are major producers of energy resources like crude oil and gas, which means a lot of the countries in the world are heavily dependent on these countries for their energy resources. Going against Russia fully would mean prohibition on these supplies, which may cause a major economic crisis to many nations. Another important factor to consider is the threat of harsh consequences that Putin has given to any country that tries to come between Russia's actions.
Whoever tries to interfere with us, and even more so to create threats for our country, our people should know that Russia's response will be immediate and will lead you to such consequences that you have never experienced in your history.
Russia has been known for its aggressive geopolitical strategies, and thus none of the countries want to take that chance. Now, in case of India, the scenario is that India imports two major supplies from Russia: arms and oil. In fact, India is dependent on Russia and Ukraine for a combined of 85% of its energy resources, and it's dependent on Russia for almost 50% of its military arms. With sanctions from various countries on Russia and the impact that will have on the production chain of Russia, it seems that the import of oil and arms from Russia will reduce. That will mean a hike on rate of almost everything in the Indian market and a negative impact on the Indian defense sector. This can be a reason to worry for India due to our ongoing geopolitical tensions with China. Also, the growing relationship between China and Russia can be a serious threat to us. Along with this, the stock market of the world, as well as that of India, which is recovering after the pandemic, might take a serious hit due to this war. With these factors in consideration, this might as well be the biggest war since the Second World War. Today, the NATO countries, including even the United States of America, are afraid of entering direct action with Russia because the risk of the outbreak of another world war is quite high. And also because Ukraine is not a part of NATO. We can only hope that our world leaders act in a peaceful and sensible manner and balance is soon restored in this world. In such challenging times, our appeal to our audience would be to refrain from spreading insensitive content and fake news on social media. Stay united and spread positivity. We hope that this video was helpful to you. For more such content, subscribe to our channel. Until then, bye-bye. Namaste.